CDM Executive Board developed the regulatory framework, methodologies, regional collaboration centers, accreditation systems, registry, stakeholder forums, and capacity building programs in support of the CDM. Members of the CDM panels or the pool of experts from the rosters of experts made significant contributions in developing the CDM. Just to give you an idea of the extent of these infrastructures, here are some statistics just adding to what Margaret has illustrated to date. 28 designated operational entities, DOEs, are accredited for validation and verification of CDM activities and certification of emission reductions as at the 8th of September this year, with 5 more entities applying for accreditation. 221 CDM methodologies, both large and small scale, across all kinds of sectors and technologies, and 33 tools for investment analysis, sustainability impacts, etc., have been approved by the Executive Board. The cumulative number of approved standardized baseline stands at 62, of which 18 are valid as at the end of August this year. Currently, there are 6 regional collaboration centers, RCCs, which are operational. The first RCC was established in Lome, Togo in 2013 and was followed by RCC in Kampala, Uganda, St. George's, Grenada, Panama City, Panama, and Bangkok, Thailand. The Sustainable Development Co-Benefit Tool, launched in 2013, enables project participants to showcase the sustainable development benefits of their projects. By showcasing the benefits, whether it is improving indoor air quality or providing electricity to light a room or creating employment, projects can show potential users of their certified emission reductions the real value of CERs beyond only emission reductions. In September of 2015, the board launched the online platform for voluntary cancellation of CERs. The platform allows CDM projects to offer CERs for voluntary cancellation to the public. The platform is unique within the UN, as it is the only online service where you can directly cancel CERs through direct payment and with instant confirmation provided as a cancellation certificate. It is available in English, French, and Spanish, and supports both online and offline payments. These are just a few examples of essential and many times first of its kind elements of the CDM infrastructure, not to mention others such as the CDM information system and software elements underpinning the CDM registry. Several stakeholders present here today have at some point in time become acquainted with some of these elements of the CDM infrastructure. These infrastructure elements, with some changes and customization, could be applied by the Article 6.4 supervisory body in expeditious implementation of the Article 6.4 mechanism. Let me therefore finish by saying that one key element which I observed over the years, an observation I made on the CDM, is that ambition is often linked with creativity. We will be required to do more with the resources and instruments available. I have no doubt that this is something which will continue and only be amplified in the future as we need to ramp up climate action. Reusing by repurposing existing infrastructure should not, however, undermine those who want to see things through a different pair of lens, or who generally want to build something better or improve on what already exists. Nobody expects Article 6.4 to be a copy of CDM. but there's also no need to reinvent the wheel, or at least not all parts of the wheel, so to speak. Let me finally take the opportunity to thank our panelists and the moderator for being here, contributing to this important discussion. And for all of you in the audience here in Sharm el-Sheikh, and to those joining us online, on behalf of the Executive Board, thank you.
Thank you, Omar. We really appreciate that. And now we'd like to listen to a different perspective on these issues from our panelists. But first, I'm really pleased and delighted to introduce Ms. Maria Al-Shia. I hope I said that okay, Maria. Maria is an international policy advisor for the Ministry of Energy in Saudi Arabia. She is currently serving as a member of the Article 6.4 supervisory body. Prior to this, she worked for several years as a global market analyst in the energy industry. Maria, can you please give us some insights into how the supervisory body is going, about developing the new Article 6.4 mechanism, and what role do you see the CDM may play? Over to you, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to Mr. Omar Alcock for outlining all of the wonderful achievements that the CDM has. In contrast, the supervisory body feels like a newborn baby for the mechanism because we're still in our infancy. We are a supervisory body that was mandated by a decision that was taken in November of last year. And for several reasons, the supervisory body was not able to convene until 4 months ago. So we're only 4 months old. And we had to deliver on 4 different mandates within 4 months to be delivered at this COP. So a lot of what we're doing and what we have been doing is just trying to learn and leverage on experiences like the CDM and what the CDM EB has been able to achieve throughout the years to help us in being able to reach our goals, while also taking into account that we need to stay true to the decision of the 6.4 mechanism that was taken at COP26 and all of the requirements and that were agreed to by parties, including requirements for methodologies and participation. And we expect to see a lot of cooperation between the 6.4 mechanism and the CDM in terms of being able to leverage on all of the experiences that you were speaking on and learn from the lessons so we don't fall into, so we don't have the same challenges or fall into perhaps the same pitfalls, if I may say, and the learning experience that were experienced under CDM, but also trying to build off of that. So we take it as a foundation and build off of it. It's not a reinvention of the wheel, it's a re-optimization of the wheel in order to accommodate the Paris Agreement, where we know both developed and developing countries are parties. They have commitments towards their own NDCs, and this is a mechanism that exists within that environment, and it has its own requirements for methodologies and procedures of approval, and all of that are things that we still need to take into consideration in the supervisory body, but we're hoping that we're able to cooperate with our CDM experienced in order to build on that. And we also know from the decision that there will be a lot of communication back and forth to transition the CDM activities that were agreed, and also to transition the CERs that qualify from the CDM to the mechanism, and all of that will require close coordination and synergy between the EB and the supervisory body, and we really look forward to that. But again, I have to repeat, we're very still early stages in the supervisory body, and we're still learning, and we're still building and elaborating on all of the guidance that we need to provide, and we're here to learn and provide the guidance that's needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria, for sharing that and for being here with us. Now, very interesting insights. I particularly appreciated the not reinventing, but re-optimizing the wheel. before we do that, I'm not quite sure, Nicholas, can we do the Mentimeter? Is that possible? Before we get into the presentations, we'd love to have your views here on in the room, as well as online, to rank in order of priority how useful you think the following parts of the CDM infrastructure would be for Article 6.4. So you can go to www.menti.com, enter the code there, 8725-7395, or scan this QR code with your phone. And there's 6 different rankings, and one is, hopefully we'll be able to pull this up. There should be methodologies. There should be 2, the accreditation system. 3, the designated national authorities. 4, registry. 5, the voluntary cancellation capability. And 6, the sustainable development tool. We'd love your input, because it's important for us to know what the audience thinks as well. And I think this could potentially be useful for the supervisory body as well as for the CDM Executive Board. So if you want to do that, and maybe in the meantime, Juliana, are you going to give your presentation here? Or are you going to? Thanks for the technical glitch. Okay, we can maybe we can close this out. Thanks so much. It looks like methodologies in order of importance, and then the accreditation system are ranking. Thank you so much. Let's close that out and let's move to the presentation. We weren't quite sure if Juliana had to go up there. Now, I have the pleasure to introduce Miss Juliana Kessler, and Juliana is a researcher at Perspectives Climate Research, which is mainly focusing on carbon markets. She coordinates the International Initiative for Development of Article 6 Methodology Tools, which is an initiative led by a group of international methodology experts that aim to provide a pragmatic yet robust approach to transition existing methodologies to make them fit for Article 6. Juliana, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Margaret Ann. And yeah, very interesting survey results, and I would like to build on them and dive a little bit deeper into other efforts that are currently undertaken outside also of the UNFCCC regime with the goal to advance methodological work that is aligned with the Article 6.4 rules, principles, and requirements, and specifically focus on one initiative that has already been introduced. And yeah, starting point of that initiative was basically the realization that we have these over 250 baseline and monitoring methodologies and 33 related tools, as Omar also just mentioned. And they are currently approved under the CDM and applied also in many other carbon mechanisms worldwide. And this is an important body of knowledge for operating projects and programs that generate emission credits. And this knowledge should not just be discarded and forgotten about. Instead, the existing methodologies and tools developed under the CDM should transition to the post-Kyoto mechanism, but be adjusted in a manner that they reflect the new Article 6 methodological requirements. And yes, please, next slide. Because the Paris Agreement, and specifically the Article 6 rules agreed at COP26 in Glasgow last year introduced a new set of stringent principles and rules. And these Article 6 methodological requirements go beyond the ones of the Kyoto mechanisms. So just to illustrate here on the left, I now need to, thank you. So on the left, you see the old principles that have already been applied under the CDM and joint implementation, like take into account uncertainty, leakage, and relevant circumstances, be transparent, conservative, and credible, recognize suppressed demand, address reversals where applicable. And now under Article 6, we have new requirements like encourage ambition over time, align with the long-term temperature goal of the Paris Agreement, contribute to reducing emission levels in the host party and align with its NDC, if applicable, its long-term low-emission development strategy and the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement, be below business as usual, take into account policies and measures, and contribute to the equitable sharing of mitigation benefits between the participating countries. So, coming back to the initiative, next slide, please. The International Initiative for the Development of Article 6 Methodology Tools was launched this January with the goal to provide a pragmatic but robust approach to the transition of existing CDM methodologies and to make them fit for Article 6. So the objective is really to align approved CDM baseline and monitoring methodologies with Article 6 rules and principles through the development of so-called Article 6 tools. And these Article 6 tools would then be added to the CDM methodologies, and in this way to enable like a rapid application of methodologies under Article 6. So that this valley of death, as it is illustrated in the slide, would basically be bridged. And by using the CDM methodologies under Article 6 and to prevent also the high costs of developing new methodologies entirely from scratch. And the IIMT is led by an international international team of methodology experts. It is important to mention here that it's an independent initiative, so no interests of project developers or governments are represented. And the team is closely following the work of the Article 6.4 supervisory body. For example, we react to calls for inputs, or we also observe, better to say, the SB meetings and hold interventions, etc. And we have seen some of the concepts of the IIAMT tools also reflected in the draft recommendation and in the informal note prepared by the Secretariat and the working group of the SB on methodologies. And we would like to continue also this work, this close cooperation with the supervisory body and its members to really facilitate bridging the methodology gap. Next slide, please. What concerns the concrete outputs the initiative has generated so far, first, draft concepts have been developed and published at the end of April, and then an interim draft version of the draft tools, and we aim to finalize a final draft version of the tools by next week, 15 November. That is then also open for public consultation. And so we have three tools, basically, one on additionality, one on baseline setting, one on MRV, and the NDC guidance. And the NDC guidance shall specifically serve host countries to evaluate mitigation activities linked to the NDC and to their long-term low-emission development LTLETs, if they have one in brief. What's important to mention is that the respective tools are standalone tools for additionality determination, baseline setting, and MRV. And they do not, so yeah, they are focused on program and projects. So there's no coverage of sectoral or policy interventions pursued. And also it's important to mention that the tools are currently sector and technology agnostic. So this means that activity-specific considerations are currently not taken into account, and in the medium to long term, further refinement of the tools could be undertaken so that they are consistent with the differences of activity types. But currently we really focus on the high-level issues that focus on a wide range of activity types. Next slide, please. I cannot go into all the steps we have or the experts have included into the different tools, but I would like to stress a few elements and key aspects in the additionality baseline and MRV tool that have attracted most of the attention. So when we come to the baseline tool, and specifically to the selection of the baseline approach, as the rules, modalities, and procedures of Article 6.4 outline 3 different performance-based approaches, the experts propose a hierarchy approach based on the data intensiveness and availability of the approach. So basically, I mean, if feasible for the sector, then it is recommended to start with a BAT, so a best available technology approach, and then in case that is not available, to move to an ambitious benchmark, and yeah, if there is a lack of data, then an approach based on existing actual or historical emissions adjusted downward should be chosen. Then another concept that has been extensively discussed also in the SB meeting, at least a similar concept there, it's called the baseline contraction factor, but it's basically the same concept. In the baseline tool, it's called the ambition coefficient, and this one is applied to the baseline's emissions intensity and falling linearly over time to adjust the baseline to adjust the baseline emissions downwards and reaching net zero in the time the host country wants to achieve net zero. So the application of this factor would basically ensure that carbon markets as a whole are in line with the long-term goal of the Paris Agreement. When it comes to the additionality tool, one of the core elements or steps, better to say, in this tool is the determination of or the evaluation of the inherent financial additionality risk of the specific activity type, which is a pre-step for the determination of financial additionality to ensure that realistic assumptions are provided by each activity proponent in comparison to the risk scenario. And depending on the results, so if the inherent additionality risk is low, then the activity would be eligible for a global positive list for financial additionality, and if the risk is medium to high, then the activity would need to go through an investment analysis. And when it comes to the MRV tool here, there is, or it recognizes this, the need for a balance between the principles of conservativeness and accuracy. And as these principles are often contradictory, and the tool strives for both. So tries really to tackle this trade-off between accuracy and conservativeness by applying a layered approach. In developing the monitoring methodology, the activity developer should strive for the highest level of accuracy available without prohibitive costs, and where a higher level of accuracy would lead to prohibitive costs, then the activity developer can use a less accurate methodology if it ensures that emissions are rather overestimated. Yes. So this was a very brief dive into the nitty-gritties of the tools. And please, next slide. And you all welcome, obviously, to have a look at the full tools and to provide some comments. We would highly appreciate that. Here the link is shared. I think the presentations are also uploaded. And yes, the public consultation will start or will be launched on 15 November and accessible through this link here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana. And yeah, please take note of the public consultation. And it's very interesting to hear about all the tools that you've prepared and that each is to be a standalone. This was the Mentimeter. Now we've got, I've got the pleasure to introduce Mr. Werner Betzenbichler, who is chair of the designated operational entities of the Coordination Forum, to share insights on how the CDM accreditation infrastructure may benefit the implementation of Article 6.4 mechanism. Werner is known to many of you. He is a physicist and, among others, the managing director of the Designated Operational Entities and Independent Entities Association, or DIA, nominating him as chair of the DOE Forum. Now, during his professional career, he gained in-depth insights and experience in various accreditation systems, including those under the CDM, the JI, and the EU ETS. He's been active in MRV of greenhouse gases for more than 20 years and has provided audit services and training in all emissions categories and industry sectors. Werner, it's wonderful to welcome you, to see you again, and over to you. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Margaret, and thank you also to the organizers to enable me to share my views as the DOE Association with you. And okay, I prepared some slides and well, just a second. Page down is. Just go here. Ah, okay. No. Ah, okay. Right. Okay, now it works. So, yeah, physicists and technology. Okay, so I would like to start with two slides on turning points in the DOE business environment, and then share some views on the transitioning from the DOE perspective, and finally a wishness for transition from CDM to Article 6.4 I presented to the CDM Executive Board already in my previous interaction. Okay, so this is a very old slide. So I prepared for my DOE interaction in 2013, so it reminded me that I'm getting old. But on the other hand, I think it's quite interesting to tell you what was the situation in 2013 when the first Kyoto commitment period ended and there was a height of DOE services requested in 2011 and 2012. But after that point in time, so yeah, the market was losing ground. So validations already in March 2013 had been at 10% of the peak level experienced some years earlier, and verifications were still okay when finishing the Kyoto monitoring period, but it was also already a forecast that this will go down dramatically. So this was a turning point in the business development of various DOEs. So they had to decide what to do with the amount of staff which was qualified as auditors, where to concentrate the staff, what are the equivalent locations for officers to serve the market in future, and what qualifications are required. So we could hear that today we have 28 accredited DOEs. So at that point in time, I believe we had 45, 48, Many of them have been global players with offices and auditors located in all the continents, more or less. Nowadays, the market is focused on, let's say, on the core CDM markets, India, China, some few DOEs in Latin America, very different to the previous business environment. So the carbon market was more or less for CDM shutting down. Everybody knows then when EU has, let's say, not using CRs any longer for compliance tool, that there was a loss of interest in CRs. On the other hand, so the DOEs, they didn't know what comes afterwards, so maybe this is only a breather and we can continue with at a similar market level in future. So the DOEs were facing the risk to have an oversupply of labor, and this was then finally triggering a market consolidation, as already mentioned, so with new head offices for the DOE, with new smaller entities coming up, taking over market leadership. So now the market of DOEs is very different to that time 10 years ago. So there have been many uncertainties at that point in time. If I go to the recent situation, so that's a very similar slide, almost the same lines I shared with the CDM Executive Board last week. So the business environment at the end of 2020 for the DOE. So again, CDM business is losing ground, but from a very different level. So the amount of validation is almost going to zero. So there are some few renewals of creating period and post-registration changes validation, but that's it. Verification are still okay when finishing the pre-21 period, but again similar to the post-Kyoto period, so it's already foreseeable that it also will approach a very low level. On the other hand, for the existing DOEs, there is nowadays good business in voluntary market, who accept in many cases voluntary market scheme CDM accreditation as basis to run validations and verification under the voluntary schemes. Again, the DOEs are confronted with a lot of market uncertainties. What will be the market volume of Article 6.4 in future? Is this maybe at a similar size as we have seen under the Kyoto Protocol earlier? Where are the locations of the projects? Because most likely there might be different material, let's say a different portfolio of host country which will use Article 6.4 in their strategy. What will be the costs for qualification of auditors and the costs for accreditation? So, but in contrary to the situation in 2013, now there is a risk for the DOEs to have an undersupply of labor, to have two less auditors, if really Article 6.4 will get some momentum. So what are the important topics for the DOEs when CDM, as we see, is now phased out and when launching Article 6.4? So we want to see a fair process when aligning CDM accreditation period with actual demand of services. So the accreditation period, so usually DOEs have a 5 years accreditation period, and it starts at very different times. So if somebody has to ask for reaccreditation today, he knows, okay, CDM reaccreditation, will I have business for the coming 5 years? Most likely not. But then, am I willing to pay my accreditation fees for the next 5 years now? And others maybe have seen reaccreditation 1 or 2 years ago. They decided a year earlier, usually, that they are happy with reaccreditation, that this could, they have some business perspectives. So now, okay, they have no additional accreditation costs beside, let's say, the regular surveillance audits by the assessment teams. So this is some kind of unfair treatment among the competitors. Furthermore, there is a need to have a swift transfer from CDM accreditation to Article 6.4 accreditation. We have, or at least those who have already, let's say, participated in the accreditation process of the CDM starting in 2003 or 4, and then lasting a while until the first DOEs got accredited. So if you start from scratch, this is really a time-demanding process. Because then you have to do a lot of witness activity in each sectoral scope, kind of technology, where the methodologies run, renewable energy, chemical industry, whatsoever. And this can be very time-consuming, and this would not deliver, let's say, the required resources which might be needed by the Article 6.4. Furthermore, there's a need to have smart cost and time management. So if it's really costly to maintain 2 accreditations, so this will be, the costs will be transferred somehow to the clients. The clients are the project owners, and then everybody is complaining again on high transaction costs. There is also a wish to have further collaboration with the UNFCCC infrastructure. So far, as you see, my interactions with the CDMEB, we have a regular interaction at almost every EB meeting. But this is not yet established with this Article 6.4 supervisory body. So, therefore, what is needed, or what is the remaining need for CDM accreditation? So, the transitioning means that sooner or later no CDM validation will be required any longer. So, which means accreditation becomes obsolete. That's already presented. So, we want to have this fair treatment with the ending of the accreditation period before that time. So, maybe there needs to be a process aligned between Article 6.4 and CDM Executive Board to be applicable for all DOEs to run accreditation or re-accreditation now. So therefore we suggest to extend the existing periods for running further regular surveillance audits instead of running a re-accreditation process in future, which is also then supervising the performance and the capabilities of the auditors, to maybe request payment of the accreditation fee on an annual basis instead of a 5-year basis, and to continue the regular performance monitoring as it is. What are the needs for a swift transitioning? So, as told, an immediate collaboration between the CDM accreditation panel and the not yet existing Article 6.4 accreditation panel or accreditation working group, however it will be named at the end. So we also need then acceptance of scope, so the technical areas where the DOEs are already accredited, in order to avoid endless witnessing activities for getting full accreditation. And also of the activities, so it means validation and verification. Anyway, I believe almost all DOEs are then accredited for both activities, and this could be done by a grandfathering process. So once an existing DOE is accepted, CDM DOE is accepted as an Article 6.4 DOEs, also then the activities and the scope should be accepted as it has been under the CDM. So this was also the case when GI was more or less getting obsolete, and CDM took over the role of accreditation body for the remaining GI activities. We also asked the UNFCCC Secretariat to run workshops to train the auditors of the DOEs with regard to additional Article 6.4 specific issues. So this again could ensure then the required sources when Article 6.4 gains momentum. We ask to use the recent accreditation resources, which are resources ordered by the accreditation panel, the assessment teams, to make use of the same teams, because otherwise also these resources would be missing under the 6.4, and to transfer also the records of performance monitoring from CDM to Article 6.4 to then clearly say, okay, this is a useful tool to get the performance, the quality of DOE work harmonized, to have a reference to the performance records, and why should everybody start from scratch again? So the performance records enable either to have a lower frequency in getting assessed by the assessment teams, or let's say for those where there are concerns on the quality, to have a higher frequency of such assessments. So finally, there's a wish list for this transitioning process from our side. So on the aspects for reducing costs, so avoid double accreditation costs, so by a joint accreditation, as experienced under GI. So at the end of the GI period, there have been only 2 entities under GI which have not been also CDM DOEs. So, and I assume that this will be very similar with Article 6.4. So ensure that there's a grandfathering of the confirmed DOE performance, and there should be, as told, this UN-triggered workshops. Then furthermore, an aspect for reducing the uncertainty in business development or maintaining the resources in the team, to have this done as a speedy process and make the decisions now, best at this COP, that there will be such a smooth transitioning process. And my last slide with regard to the regular interaction with the Article 6.4 supervisory body. So I hope that there is the establishment of a specific either a forum, as we have under the CDM DOE Coordination Forum, or the acceptance of the existing CDM forum as the voice of the DOEs. So to request also, that's my request, to have obligatory contribution to the funding of this forum. Recently it's only done on a voluntary basis by joining an association which has then as a legally established entity the possibility to collect some contributions from the DOEs to especially to fund the work of the forum, and to have finally a similar procedure like under the CDM procedure for direct communication, which enables the direct interaction, and very important at the beginning of each SB meeting. So I have been fulfilled the DOE forum chairmanship now since many years, 12 years I believe now. And so in the beginning we had a fight because interaction was always at the end of the CDMEB meetings, and we could only react to draft procedures and whatever was discussed in the B meetings. So it's much more effective and efficient to have this discussion at the beginning of the meetings to provide input to the decision-making process of the Article 6.4 supervisory body, and not to react afterwards and make corrections 1 meeting or 2 meetings later. So that's it from my side, and thanks for your attention.
Many thanks, Werner, for that. We realize how much the infrastructure is not just on the markets, but also around the designated operational entities as well. That needs to be decided. So finally, let's focus on the role as well of the designated national authorities, the DNA Forum, and their potential to support Article 6.4 mechanism. And I'm pleased to invite Mr. Albert Magalan, the DNA of the Philippines, to take the floor. Albert is presently the Chief of the Climate Change Service at the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. He is a regular member of the Philippine delegation to the sessions at the UNFCCC, and as the country representative in the ASEAN Working Group on climate change. He also represents the Philippines as the sessions of the UN Environmental Assembly. He served as the Asia Pacific Regional Representative to the UNFCCC DNA Forum Chairing Committee and as Global Co-Chair representing developing countries. He's the Philippines' lead negotiator on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and served as the co-facilitator of the negotiations on Article 12. Albert, it's wonderful to see you again. I got the pleasure to meet you in Manila earlier this year. Thank you, and over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Margaret, for that kind introduction. A pleasant afternoon to our all participants in this side event. It's so nice to be reunited with some of you who are also CDM practitioners before, and to my co-panelists, a pleasant afternoon also. So I'm here to give you some, some of my experiences or the observations I had being engaged with the activities of the DNA Forum, and I would try to highlight the role of the DNA Forum in the successful implementation of the CDM as we are transitioning to Article 6.4 mechanism, looking at its potential in operationalizing the Article 6.4 mechanism. Okay, let me start with this slide, giving us the origin, how the DNA Forum originated. So it was actually the CDM Executive Board that established the DNA Forum because parties have requested the EB to, at its first session, to broaden the participation of in the CDM, which would include also the conduct of regular meetings with the members of the DNA Forum. So we have paragraph 36 of the decision 7 of the first session of the CMP. Okay, what is the primary objective of the DNA Forum? So basically, it is clear to us, to the DNAs, that the forum will provide opportunities for us, for DNA representatives, to exchange views, share experiences, provide feedback, and follow-up actions related to CDM. And most important is we have this opportunity to bring forward our common views and issues that should be given attention by the CDM Executive Board. So far, we have the Secretariat, with the assistance of the Secretariat, we were able to have 21 physical annual DNA Forum meetings, participated by 90 countries, which would attend the global meeting every year. So there are plenary sessions that we usually have, which are run in English, French, and Spanish. Okay, so, this is just the duplication of the second slide. Let me skip this. Okay, so how do we interact with the Executive Board members of the CDM? So there is, I think Werner has also mentioned this, that there is this existing procedure on the direct communication with stakeholders. So this would allocate, the Executive Board would allocate twice a year interaction with the forum that would coincide with its board meetings. So it would also give us the avenue to interact with them through the co-chairs of the DNA Forum. So actually, all the DNA Forum members are not invited to the interaction, but we are well represented by our co-chairs. So as reported by the Secretariat the CDM two-year business and management plan. From 2022 to 2023, the Secretariat has the mandate to deliver 3 DNA forum events each year. So 1 global forum and 2 regional events at least. Okay, so to date, we have 172 DNAs, which are responsible for approving projects at the national level and attesting to their contribution to sustainable development. We have, the DNA has also facilitated the mechanism that have stimulated sustainable development and emission reductions through its more than 8,000 registered projects and programs. So this would give industrialized countries flexibility in how to meet their emission reduction limitation targets. Okay, further, as regards to the role of the DNA Forum in the CDM implementation, and I would like to highlight this because this is the opportunity on how to re-optimize this experience as we transition to Article 6.4. So DNAs were able to have direct contribution in standardized baselines development. As of September 2022, the cumulative number of approved standardized baselines stands at 62. The forum has also provided opportunities for DNA representatives to exchange views, share the experiences related to CDM, and also, as I mentioned earlier, this has given us the opportunity to bring forward some issues to the attention of the CDM Executive Board. Okay, so transitioning to the Article 6.4 mechanism. So there is already the decision to CMP 16 that CMP parties agreed to continue the temporary measures adopted by the board for post-2020 cases with a view of transitioning to 6.4 mechanism later. If these measures are found to be eligible for transition until the transition process becomes operational. So we're still issuing letters of approval as required to submit the request for registration under these temporary measures. So these are the important dates that we are taking note of, that once project participants submit requests to the Secretariat or to the DNA by no later than December 31, 2023, the DNAs would need to send the approval of transition to the Article 6.4 supervisory body by no later than December 31, 2025. Okay. Further on the roles of the DNAs in the 6.4 mechanism, we envision that the DNA Forum will play an important role in facilitating the smooth transition of CDM activities to Article 6.4 mechanism. First, by discussing practical issues at the forum and bring such issues to the attention of the CDM Executive Board. Okay, while we do accept that the CDM is clearly facing down at this period, the rules, modalities, and procedures, or the RMPs, that were adopted in Glasgow last year also clearly states that host parties should elaborate on and apply national arrangements for the mechanism under the approval and supervision of the supervisory body. So, as regards to my last slides, there are many lessons learned as DNAs, as well as many specific capacities that DNAs have accumulated over time and which have become very useful for the Article 6.4 to build upon. So the DNAs through the forum will still continue to play a relevant role in the near future, allowing us to acquire further experience and also exchange views as regards to these developments, transitioning, particularly the developments on transitioning. So the forum will also be a good occasion to work on the potential evolving role of the DNAs if they are seen fit for adapting to the new climate regime, and also the opportunity to work together to become fit for the future, thereby giving us the avenue to reoptimize our experience in preparation for the operationalization of the Article 6.4 mechanism. Thank you, and a pleasant afternoon once again.
Thank you. Many thanks, Albert. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have now heard different perspectives on how different parts of the CDM infrastructure may support the development and implementation of the Article 6.4 mechanism. Many thanks to all of these speakers. Now, I will be inviting questions and comments from the audience. However, what we'd like to do as well, because sometimes there's never time, we'd like to do another Mentimeter, if possible. Based on what you've heard, or your own knowledge, the question is, what is your one recommendation for what the CDM Executive Board should pass to the supervisory body? So again, go to Mentimeter, www.minty.com, into this code 8725-7395. And we'd like you'll be able to write this out. What is your one recommendation? Some of you, I know you're cheeky and you'll put more than one, and that's okay, for what the CDM Executive Board should pass to the supervisory body. And we'll share those in a minute. But in the meantime, we've got approximately 15 minutes, of which we need the last almost 5 minutes just to sum up, because we definitely want to hear from Frank Rolke with us as well. But do we have any questions from the floor? Brilliant. There's the first gentleman here, and how do we deal with, let's get you a mic.
Okay. That's the next. Sorry.
If you could state your, is there a mic or?
Yep.
Thank you very much. My name is John Scheidler. I'm from the United States. So my question is really addressed to Werner. And the question is, why would the new supervisory board need to establish an accreditation mechanism when there already exists an accreditation mechanism using ISO international standards for conformity assessment, in which the major voluntary programs like VERA participate, and where frankly the performance of designated operating entities operating in the voluntary market has found to be deficient and are now being required to become accredited through the ISO standards. Why not just adopt the ISO standards?
Thank you very much. And who is that? We'll take a few maybe rounds of questions. Who is that for specifically?
Werner.
Werner, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I just didn't hear that. Does anybody else have another question yet? Or Werner, do you want to answer that?
Okay. So, yeah, thanks for your question. So, indeed, so ISO standards look very similar, the ISO 14065, 64 and so on. Very similar what is written in the, let's say, accreditation standards and the accreditation procedure. So, but this is not randomly, so this is by intention. On the other hand, if you refer to other voluntary schemes like VERA or Gold Standard, so they also refer to ISO 14065, 64. But
the verification, or they accept accredited entities that also have demonstrated that they have knowledge on Werner or VCS methodologies, and this is given, or this is confirmed by the national accreditation bodies. So the ISO standard says, okay, whenever you have some mandatory system or additional requirements, okay, they prevail. So they prevail because the standard is as generic as possible. Which means, so if you want to become a verifier, so you have to be accredited for ISO 14064. But in your accreditation license, you also must have reference that you have the competence to understand Werner methodologies that you work with Werner. So your auditors are qualified for that. And this is an addition. So now for the CDM, the accreditation, there haven't been national accreditation body because this is a global system. There was one UN accreditation body, the scheme as it is under CDM, but they use the same, in principle, competence requirement as the ISO standard, but they automatically then say, okay, we are only competent for the CDM. We do not confirm that you are accredited for 14065 because this is under, let's say, under the mandate of the National Accreditation Body and the IAF members. But we confirm that you have the competence under CDM, but your requirements are very similar to those under ISO 14065. That's it.
Thank you, Werner. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, the young lady here. Do we have, where is the mic? Sorry, thank you. And thank you so much to those that are providing answers to the one recommendation. One thing I would like to point out is this digital infrastructure, which, I mean, you know, this is spanning what a difference between the last 10 years, last 20 years has made. And I think that's something that'll be very interesting as we see develop what the supervisory board does with this. Please, would you introduce yourself and who the question is to, or which people? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Olivia Tatarletti. I'm from a civil society organization, Legal Response International, who gives legal advice to the delegations here at the negotiations. My question is probably for Juliana regarding additionality. I wanted to know if you have any views on how sort of additionality under the new system of Article 6.4, in particular, to demonstrate mitigation that is above the level required by law might work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Should I go ahead? Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Yes, I mean, there are also new requirements when it comes to additionality in the RMPs, and if you look at the additionality tool, we have developed 5 different steps of how, you know, additionality should be determined under Article 6. And I mean, I pointed out this inherent risk assessment, but I mean, financial additionality is not necessarily a new concept. But on the other hand, also in the NDC guidance, what you will see is that host countries, in the guidance provides host countries a guideline of how to assess whether, you know, the activity they are or the project developers want to implement forms part of their unconditional or conditional NDC targets. So this is also very relevant because, I mean, and this is also related to additionality. It has a link, and it's for the host country. It's a risk, no? Also in terms of what do I sell, and does this form part of my conditional NDC, unconditional NDC, and what are the implications thereof? So this is one aspect. But then, I also encourage you to have a look at the additionality tool. I'm more focused on the baseline tool, and yes.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Olivia, for your question. Does anybody else have any further questions? The gentleman in the back, can we get him a microphone? Thank you. Thank you. Just, yeah, please introduce yourself.
Yeah,
and-
this
and
is
to
Stefan
him.
Hoch, also from Perspectives. I have a question to Werner, though, on verification. Two, actually, sorry. I wonder what you think the role of verifiers should be and the capacity building program now for the new mechanisms. Because, you know, many developing countries, especially the lower income ones, have often raised concerns about a lack of expertise regionally. Do you think there should be a role for the capacity building program to also address building local expertise in some of the host countries that do not yet have that expertise? And potentially related, we have done a lot of analysis of, you know, the existing CDM pipeline as a basis for transition to now the new mechanism. And I've seen that in many countries, there's a lot of unissued pre-2020 CER potential. And I wonder whether you have any insight from your members, whether there are also any barriers to that on the verification side. There are, of course, market factors, that's clear, but specifically on the verification side, is there any barrier that you would see there, or do you think it is more market forces? Thank you.
Werner, over to you, and very interesting with regards to the verification, because we haven't quite talked about this necessarily, and they are a big part, actually, of this. Please, Werner.
Okay, yeah, thanks for your two questions. Regarding the role in capacity building, so it depends again what will be the market side of 6.4, also 6.2 is relevant. So I would expect maybe most likely for 6.2 it's more relevant to become a local, maybe a local, have some kind of local accreditation schemes and local verifiers, or this would offer more possibilities compared to 6.4, which will be a global scheme, and it will focus still on, let's say, where will be the hotspots of host countries, the hotspot of the markets. So it doesn't make sense to develop business and train auditors located in country or region A if there are almost no projects there, because then they have no business, and then you have a lot of trained resources which maybe are not able to be transferred to the region B, where you have then the projects running. So, and this can only be seen, let's say, more or less in future. So anyway, capacity building is usually done by the entities themselves, the DOEs, because they have to qualify their staff. They have to decide, okay, I need staff in this and that country, and I have to train it, and I have to get them qualified. It's not an issue, let's say, of workshop, let's say, for the open public, because it's a qualification of the inner team, and then it's even duplicated. So because the two competitors, if they work in the same environment, they are training the teams themselves. Under the CDM, we have meanwhile established at least once a year a harmonized workshop, let's say, by the Secretariat, which is very useful to get a harmonized quality among the various entities. And this can be, that's anyway a recommendation then I would have to the Supervisory Board to be established also under Article 6.4 to have such regular harmonized trainings. So it could be open for interested entities, of course. We also will see applicant entities in new hotspot markets, most likely. But as told, so this is then, anyway, it's always an entrepreneurial decision, and it's nothing to be, let's say, completely steered from the ruler, okay, there's anyway no government, from the UN or whomsoever. Regarding, as I understood, pre-2020 verification, so in the voluntary market. So, yeah, as I have shown in my presentation, so many are more working in the voluntary market than in other markets. So the voluntary market, though, they have their own rules again. So how to deal with pre-2020, post-2020 emission reductions. So requiring a host country approval and the corresponding adjustment and all these things. So I think that's a decision of each DOE or each entity themselves, whether they deal with this market or whether not. For us, I think, for the DOE community, it is important to have enough market to establish the human resources with all the competences and capabilities, also with the voluntary market, because since, as told, since 2014, 2015, without this voluntary market, so we wouldn't have almost no resources to supply the coming demand for, anyway, there is demand now 6.4, there will be demand 6.2, there will be demand in national schemes, so validation, verification will become a huge demand. I see a huge demand in future, but maybe also very different accreditation than for the national schemes. But the resources, their resources are not yet there, and it's long-lasting to train an auditor to get them qualified, especially when it comes to offsetting schemes with emission reduction, additionality assessment, financial additionality assessment, whatever is required. So therefore, I think the voluntary market are important, and they only allow the DOEs to really to have a minimum, or let's say to have the current amount of resources available. Anyway, it's much less than in 10 years ago. So at the end of Kyoto, we had, I believe, more than 1,000 auditors doing full-time work under CDM NHI. Nowadays, maybe we have less than 20 full-time auditors globally, and maybe some 100 which are doing, let's say, then projects and something else, energy management system certification or renewable energy certification or something like that, but not a lot of full-time resources.
Thank you so much, Werner. We are going to have to wrap this up because we need to finish on time, but I think I hope you'll agree that it's been very fruitful, because what we did was really realize the hard work that went into creating the CDM, the executive board, and all of the capacity building, this infrastructure, which includes a regulatory framework, these various methodologies, the regional collaboration centers, accreditation system, the registry, the DOEs, the DNAs, as well as we didn't even talk about the verifiers, but I'm so glad that was a great question as well, because all of this is around how do we transfer this, and then what does this look like under the Article 6.4, and that's up to the supervisory body to rule in what's in and what's out. Your input has been very valuable today. We thank you for that. We'll obviously share this, and the supervisory body was here, but we'll be sharing this, and I think this is a collaborative effort as well, because what is different now as before is the voluntary market is really, has grown exponentially, is now at 2 billion, and there are more and more corporates that have set these net zero targets, not just countries, and in order to meet those, as much as they try to decarbonize first and reduce emissions, in order to meet those targets, they do need to offset, and one of the ways that they want to do that is with credibility, with integrity, and how this is going to fit into Article 6.4 is still yet to be decided. And as much as what I heard from Albert is we want something quick and we want to know exactly how this is going to fit in, I'm wondering if we're in for maybe a slow process as to exactly how this is going to transition, but yet to be seen. Thank you so much for joining us. And I would like to introduce Frank Wolke, the Vice Chair of the CDM Executive Board, for final thoughts on this. Thank you, Frank. Over to you.
Thank you, Margaret. And so now it remains for me to say some concluding words to wrap up the session. So first I would like to make the observation that this event has shown that the CDM without doubt offers valuable lessons learned, expertise and ready-made components that hopefully will help the new Article 6.4 mechanism come off to a fast and to a good start. So nobody would argue that the CDM is perfect, but it's through the tireless efforts that the many thousand project developers, methodological experts, DNAs, DOEs, accreditation professionals, carbon market watchdogs, EB members, UNFCCC staff member and many others, that the CDM has made steady progress over the decades. And all the people have worked very hard on improving the integrity of the system and strengthening the ambition of the mitigation projects. And what we have heard today is a testament to those experiences learned, and I hope that they will serve Article 6 in the best way that's possible. So methodological, accreditation, and nationally designated authorities are the three areas we have put in the spotlight today. There are, of course, many other areas, including registries, voluntary cancellation, capacity building, reporting on sustainable development, that are equally important and where the CDM can also offer expertise. And I'm convinced that we have ahead of us a very busy year where we all have to work together to support the development and the operational launch of Article 6.4 mechanism, and where all the lessons learned from the CDM, of course the good ones, as well as also the bad ones from the CDM, are drawn from for the future. So from the side of the CDM Executive Board, where I'm standing here, we are of course happy to continue to support the work of the Article 6.4 Supervisory Board, and I'm especially grateful that Ms. Maria Alicia could have joined us here, and now she has gone because she has other duties, but of course the negotiations are continue during the weeks. So ladies and gentlemen, let me also say thank you for our panelists, Juliane Kessler from Perspectives, Werner Betzenbichler from the DOE Forum, and Robert Magellan for the DNAs. And of course, a very special thanks goes to our excellent moderator, Margaret Ansblom from CMAI. I thank you for running us through this event. And for all of you, have a good remaining time here in Sharm el-Sheikh, and we hope of a successful outcome of all the negotiations that are ahead of us. Thank you.